Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. It's fantasy football draft season, and I get asked these questions all the time. Which player do you prefer? Player A, player B, who are you going to draft if you're in certain pick? So let's break down a dilemma you might have if you're picking in the third or fourth spot in your draft. Probably the big two are off the board, right? Le'Veon Bell and Todd Gurley, but that leaves you a choice of Ezekiel Elliott or David Johnson at number 3. So who do we like more here? Ezekiel Elliott last year, of course, we know the suspension news kind of clouded everything. We didn't know when it was going to happen. And for fantasy purposes, it kind of happened at the worst point of the year, down the stretch, spilling into the fantasy playoffs. Despite that, though, to Zeke's credit, this guy rushed for almost 1,000 yards in 10 games, right? So that's some big rushing production right there. The offense runs through Ezekiel Elliott. We know that this is a team that's going to feed him the rock. Now, it is a slightly different team this year, so that has to be noted. No Des Bryant, no Jason Witten. So fantasy mainstays for sure, but also mainstays of that offense that gave them passing options to keep the defense a little bit honest. There's really nobody who's replacing Jason Witten in that offense. There's really nobody, at least initially, who's replacing Des Bryant in that offense. So opposing defenses are going to know what this offense is going to do. And they're going to stack the box against Ezekiel Elliott. So it's going to be a little challenging for that. But still, you have to consider him the odds-on favorite to lead the league in rushing attempts, the odds-on favorite to potentially lead the league in rushing yards as well. Touches is very important in fantasy football. Also, could see him a little bit more involved in the passing game than he has been in the past. He did do that at the college level. It's not that he can't do it. It's just that the Cowboys didn't use him earlier in his career in that regard. So how does that compare to David Johnson? Well, David Johnson, of course, we know last year, if you took him first overall in your fantasy drafts, it did not work out too well, but it wasn't your fault. It's not your fault, I swear. It was the injury, of course, in week 1. And injuries happen in the NFL. They stink. They are the worst part of football, and it isn't even close. And so it cost David Johnson the entire season. But let's look back to the previous season, where he was the #1 fantasy running back in PPR. He had 80 catches that season on 107 targets. So anytime you see a running back top that 80 catch plateau, I mean, they are heavily involved in the passing game. And in PPR, that is a very, very good thing. But it's not just all catching the ball out of the backfield for David Johnson. He's a very good runner between the tackles as well. So this is a viable candidate to possibly sniff 300 carries. That's certainly within the realm of possibility for David Johnson. So that plus the catches, when you get up in that 350 touch range, that's the real deal. Plus the fact that if we look to Arizona, is this a team that's absolutely loaded up with offensive talent? Unfortunately, sorry, Cardinals fans, it isn't necessarily. I mean, you have Larry Fitzgerald there. He's going to get his touches. We know that. But beyond Larry Fitzgerald, are there really viable threats to rack up touches and those touches don't go to David Johnson? Well, I don't really think so. Bryce Butler, Christian Kirk's an exciting rookie, but the receiving game, hey, you could argue that David Johnson's the second best receiver on the team, not just receiving running back, but second best receiver on the team in general. So lots of targets, lots of touches for David Johnson. So who's my pick? Well, I think you might be able to figure it out, but it is super close. And again, we always split hairs with these, but if I had to choose one, I am going with David Johnson. The Cardinals aren't necessarily going to be the best offense in the league, but the touches are going to be there. And the beauty to David Johnson is he's not going to rely on just the carries. Even in negative game scripts where the Cardinals are trailing, he's still going to rack up touches as a receiver. So I'm going with DJ in this one. Who are you going with? Why don't you tell us in the comments below? Of course, subscribe for more videos and go check out all the fantasy football goodness at ProFootballFocus.com.